What does your mind's eye see when you think about Alaska? A vast frozen wilderness? A place for only the hardiest of adventurers? The home of big, scary wild animals? Well, we traveled to Alaska recently, and one thing we can say for sure, no matter how much one knows about Alaska, there's so much more once you go. However, before we can explore and experience Alaska, we must get there. Our first stop from our home in Texas is Vancouver, British Columbia. Vancouver is an urban jewel on Canada's western coast. With 3 million people living in the metropolitan area, it is the third largest city by population in Canada and home to the fourth busiest seaport in North America. Vancouver is a world-class destination that hosts over 10 million visitors annually and is consistently ranked as one of the world's most livable cities. We are excited to have a couple of days prior to our cruise to check this place out. One of our first discoveries, if you stop to take a selfie every time there's pretty scenery, you're going to see your own face. A lot. Our first destination is the famous Stanley Park. We couldn't wait to get on some bikes and view this landscape up close, and it did not disappoint. Stanley Park is just over 1,000 acres and opened in 1888. It's named after Lord Stanley of Preston, and hockey fans will also recognize his name, related to one of the most prestigious trophies in all of sports, the Stanley Cup. We enjoyed our ride around the seawall so much that we made 2 laps of the 6-mile loop before heading out on the remainder of the trails to explore the city's waterfront district. The trails were immaculate and well thought out, with separate paths for bikes and pedestrians. We also viewed some gorgeous park foliage and had some fun with the local artwork. The following day, we made our way to Granville Island to enjoy the stores and eateries. Our next stop was the fish market, and we came across this rustic gem of a food stand called Go Fish. The halibut fish and chips and the salmon tacos were absolutely delicious, and we loved the casual waterfront vibe. We enjoyed this immensely. From there, we decided to walk off our lunch and make the 2-mile hike to the Van Dusen Botanical Gardens. Being here in May was simply ideal. The gardens were in full spring bloom, and the pristine grounds looked more like a beautiful painting than a real-world scenery. At every turn, we were surrounded by volumes of fragrant flowers and unique plants. The gardens were so massive that it made me feel small. Okay, not really, but it was a beautiful place to spend a quiet afternoon. Morning number 3 in Vancouver, and it's time to move on to the main event, cruising to Alaska. We are boarding the Coral Princess for 7 days of exploring coastal Alaska, and we'll follow that with another 4 days of interior trekking. The process of boarding was super smooth, and before we knew it, we were in our balcony stateroom and getting ready to say so long to wonderful Vancouver. So far, the weather had been idyllic, but coastal Canada and Alaska are known for their rainforest weather, so we wondered how long our meteorological luck might continue. At last, we are on our way. A trip we've talked about for many years is finally happening, and we are excited to see Alaska with our own eyes. The first port of call is Ketchikan. Ketchikan lies in southeastern coastal Alaska. As we settle into port, we get our first taste of the misty weather we expect to see in this part of the journey. For today's activities, Karen tries her hand at zip lining. She is very brave and had no trouble taking on this adventure. On the other hand, I'm a big fan of the TV series The Deadliest Catch, so there was no way I could pass up the opportunity to go out on one of the boats from the show and see it up close. Thankfully, this experience takes place in the sheltered waters of the Inside Passage and not out on the perilous Bering Sea. It's interesting to see how everything operates and the professionalism needed to do this very dangerous work in the safest way possible. By far, the best part was hearing these men share their stories, both the harrowing and the heartwarming. It was time well spent, and seeing all the bald eagles up close was a fantastic bonus. We joined back up to walk around town and got the requisite Instagram shot on Creek Street. The next day of our cruise takes us into the Alaskan capital city of Juneau. One of the most interesting features of this city of about 30,000 residents is that it is inaccessible by car. There are no roads connecting Juneau to the rest of the state. The only ways to get here are by air or by water, so this is one case where cruising is one of the ideal modes of transportation. We are super excited about today's adventure. We are headed to Harve and Marv's for a half day of whale watching. As we arrive at the harbor, we are greeted by a bald eagle and some gloriously perfect weather. It just has that feel of a day that's going to be very, very special. After a smooth ride into the bay, it's only a matter of moments before we spot our first whale, and then another, and soon more. This is our first time seeing whales in the wild, and it's simply mind-boggling that we're seeing them go about their lives here without the boundaries of an aquarium environment. The whales we are seeing are humpbacks, and most of them are females with their young calves. They are here after a 3,000-mile migration to feed and teach their young to hunt. We are treated to numerous fluke sightings as they dive into the deep. Also some playful fin waves at the surface. As people who live in a large city where wildlife is usually limited to squirrels racing around trees, this is an experience of nature we will never forget. As we return to the dock, our minds turn to food. And why not seafood, since we are perfectly situated for it? We usually avoid touristy food places, but are headed to the famous Tracy's King Crab Shack because the buckets of king crab legs look too ridiculous not to try. Thankfully, it deliciously lived up to the hype. With our bellies full, we hail a cab and make our way to Mendenhall Glacier. All of the excursions today were planned on our own and not through the cruise ship, and it has worked out beautifully. We have not felt crowded anywhere and saved a few dollars, so we are feeling pretty good about our savvy travel choices. In addition to the glacier, we enjoyed an easy hike to Nugget Falls. We loved being able to get close up to the falls, and for most of the time we had the place to ourselves. It was magical. Juneau absolutely left us impressed as a place we would enjoy coming back to with more time to spend. The place is epic in its visual beauty, but also introduced us to some wonderful people. Everyone we crossed paths with, whether seasonal worker or full-time resident, deckhand or cab driver, they were all wonderful ambassadors for the town. There is a genuine love of place that shines through the people here, and we appreciated every minute of it. However, departure time is closing in, so it's time to get back to the ship for us. The next stop on our big Alaska adventure is the gold rush town of Skagway. The history of this rugged little town is apparent as soon as you clear the docks. The Klondike Gold Rush of 1896 quickly changed Skagway from a tiny village into a roaring boomtown in less than a year. Over 30,000 prospectors piled into the area as Skagway became a key launching point for the miners making the arduous trip into the Klondike. Today's excursion will take us to Haines Glacier, but it's not until the afternoon, so we have some time to explore the town. Skagway is very compact, so a 2-mile walk takes us from the waterfront to the historic Gold Rush Cemetery at the far end of town. In its own way, the grave markers here record the history of Skagway. Of special note is the marker for Frank Reed, who is considered a hero of the town for killing the leader of a gang that specialized in shaking down the locals for protection money. Reed died a few days later from a wound suffered in the gunfight and is honored with one of the largest monuments in the cemetery. Shortly after, we hike up to his namesake, Reed Falls. On the walk back into town, we also get a close-up view of one of the trains on the historic White Pass Railroad route. We get back to the docks, and it's time to head off on the big adventure of the day, our first close-up encounter with one of Alaska's glaciers. The excursion is a combination of a very scenic hour-long boat ride, a bit of hiking, and finally some canoe paddling to make our way to the glacier viewing area. We are awestruck, not just by the abundant beauty of this place, but how wild and open the countryside is here. It is possible to travel long distances in Alaska and not see a single sign of human development. Not a house, not a road, not a telephone pole, nothing at all but uninterrupted wilderness, and it's fantastic. It's just not something we see even in the most rural parts of our home state. For being on a large cruise ship, this excursion only has about a dozen people on it, so it feels like an adventurous expedition into the backcountry. The glacier was beautiful, but like most in Alaska, it is severely receding. The spot where we are standing was the face of the glacier just a few years ago. Now a quarter mile of water and silt means this is as close as we will get on this day. We do get a lovely consolation prize of this dazzlingly blue pool of glacier runoff, but it's a sobering reminder of the impact of a warming world. We enjoyed the boat ride back to Skagway, and we are treated to a special opportunity to see numerous sea lions basking on the rocks. We have to say, we almost passed on this excursion because the information about it didn't fully describe the experience. It turned out to be one of the most memorable days of our trip, and a reminder that going off the beaten path sometimes yields the best in unexpected rewards. Today we are on the move from visiting coastal towns to scenic cruising through Glacier Bay National Park. I will readily admit to having a significant amount of nerdy excitement about this portion of the trip. I'm also willing to confess that sometimes being a pampered traveler isn't a bad way to enjoy the adventure. As seen here, we are cozy under the blankets while being served a bento box lunch. Not exactly roughing it here in the wilds of Alaska. After a couple hours of peaceful and delicious fjord cruising, the first of the glaciers comes into view. It's time to arise from the deck chairs and go into full photographer mode. As we begin to see the glaciers up close, and especially through a long camera lens, the details become apparent. First up is Marjorie Glacier, and the shapes and colors of the ice are simply mesmerizing. These are the moments when I take a few photos and then put the camera down, as there is just so much to take in. As we move on to the next glacier, we spot other interesting photo subjects. A lone mountain goat climbing as the colors of spring are just beginning to appear in May. Soon after, a colorful spot of ice floats by and is joined by one of the many sea otters we spot while moving up the fjord. Plus, rangers from the National Park Service have boarded for the day and are providing excellent commentary. Next up is McBride Glacier, and it is massive. It is a half-mile wide and 14 miles long. McBride is the last remaining tidewater glacier in the east arm of the bay, and its frequent calving makes it a significant source of icebergs in this region. Last, but certainly not least today, was our visit to Johns Hopkins Glacier. At 1 mile wide, 250 feet above the waterline, and winding its way down 12 miles of mountain passes, this glacier is a complete stunner. Combine that with the picture-perfect splashes of sunlight, and the result is one of my favorite photos from this entire trip. It is a fitting grand finale on the grandest of cruise days. As we make our way back down the fjord, we stop in to pick up our national park stamp for our book. Shortly thereafter, we bid farewell to the National Park Service rangers who have added so much enjoyable detail to this part of the journey. It certainly would have been a different experience without the benefit of the narration and the information they provided. The following day, we have our first significant open water passage of the trip as we traverse the Gulf of Alaska on our way to College Fjord. Again, we are overwhelmed with the vastness of this state and the amount of wide open landscape. We pass through many hours of gorgeous scenery with only a lone fishing boat as a sign that people really do live here. As I view it through my lens, I wonder about the captains and deckhands who fish these waters and how self-sufficient they must be to work so far from civilization. While Glacier Bay National Park is famous for its glacial scenery, the lesser-known College Fjord certainly holds its own for interesting seascapes and beautiful glaciers. As we make our way into the fjord, we hear the story about the coastal ghost forest, a long stand of dead trees on our port side. A massive earthquake in 1964 was so powerful that certain areas of Alaska had substantial changes in land elevation. In the case we are viewing, the elevation of the land in this part of the fjord dropped by several feet. This drop allowed sea tides to inundate the trees, which eventually perished from saltwater exposure. It's mind-boggling to think about the forces at work that can alter the position of entire mountain ranges. As we slowly make our way through the icy waters of College Fjord, we are treated to several fantastic glacier views, including Bryn Mawr and Harvard glaciers. All of the glaciers here are named for colleges based on the work of the 1899 Harriman, Alaska expedition. My images and words are just inadequate to describe what we have seen the past 2 days. It surely is something that must be experienced firsthand to be fully appreciated. It has been a spectacular week and one we will never forget. Our time on the seas of Alaska is coming to a close, and it's time to explore more deeply into this remarkable place. Our ship is now docked in Whittier, and we switch modes of transportation from ocean vessel to overland train. For the next 10 hours, we get our first in-depth look at Alaska's interior. Next stop, Denali National Park and Preserve. After settling into our lodge in Denali, we are off to explore by yet another mode of transportation, and one that's dear to my heart. We are in a Jeep. Our guides lead us through a fairly gentle but absolutely gorgeous drive down the old Denali Highway that predates the current paved road to the park. We are treated to fantastic scenery and a couple of eagle sightings. One of the things we appreciate about Jeeping is that it just seems to pull together people who like to have fun. And this trip was no exception. We had a blast. Next up is our first tour of Denali National Park itself. We take a guided bus tour through the park and are fortunate to have a full-time Alaska resident leading this trip. His knowledge of the local wildlife and his stories about the history of this area added far more depth to the experience than if we had visited on our own. We got the added bonuses of a singing park ranger and a few moments to speak with a descendant of the Athabascan people who lived in this area for centuries. His stories were both heart-wrenching and uplifting. We had minimal expectations for this activity, as we figured it would just be a good introduction to Denali. It was so much more, and turned out to be one of the true highlights of the entire trip. Then, just to heighten the value of the day, we get our first hazy view of the mountain we all come here to see. Denali, the Athabascan word that translates into the Great One. Only about a third of park visitors get to see the mountain, as it is often shrouded in clouds. We admit it's not the greatest view, but still enough that we congratulate ourselves for joining the 30% club. Of course, we hold out hope that the sky will clear for an even better sighting. We round out this amazing day with some fantastic pizza and brews at Prospector's Pizzeria and Ale House. I consider myself something of a pizza aficionado, and this was easily one of the top 5 pizzas I've ever eaten. No sooner than we enter the park, we have our first wildlife sighting of the day, mom and baby moose. This is the time of year for moose to deliver their calves, and we have seen a few, but not this close up. Today we are off to do one of our favorite things, hiking. So far this beautiful trip has been done mostly sitting down, so we are happy to be out moving around in nature. Our hike takes us to the home of Denali's sled dogs. We see a quick demonstration of the sled dog team in action and hear the stories of how the dogs and the rangers support each other in getting important work done during the deepest part of the winter. It was especially interesting to hear that even in the age of motorized transportation, sled dog teams are still used in the backcountry of the park because they are simply more reliable than snow machines. Having a team of dogs provides backups in the case of injury. The dogs never fail to start because they are cold or their battery is frozen. And when camping, they can huddle with the ranger for warmth. Try doing that with a snowmobile. We had the opportunity to visit up close with one of the longtime sled dogs that's about to enter retirement with a former ranger now living in Wisconsin. And then, of course, there's the puppies. We close our visit to Denali National Park by collecting our park stamp and begin to process those bittersweet feelings that this incredible journey is nearing its conclusion. We note that evening that in our current location, we are almost equidistant from Tokyo and our home in Texas, and the adventurer in us longs to head for lands we have yet to explore. But that trip will need to wait for another day. We awake to board the motor coach that will take us from Denali to Anchorage. From Anchorage, we will be on our way home to Texas. However, by no means does this mean the trail magic is over. As we make our way south along the park's highway, the mountain comes out from the clouds as if to say farewell until next time. And we see Denali in all of its 20,310 feet of glory. And it is magnificent. We have one final day in Anchorage, and we bookend our trip in much the way we started it, with a scenic trail bike ride. We explore the Tony Knolls Coastal Trail and enjoy it so much that we cover all 22 miles out and back. Along the way, we stop at an excellent plane spotting location, and I pick up a couple of images to share with my disc golf friends back home, including the warning about moose on the course. We are booked on one of the last flights out so we can maximize our final day in Alaska. So even our ride to the airport gives us one last reason to smile. We enjoy chatting with our driver as we experience being the only passengers on a full-size bus. Our trip to Alaska is so filled with highlights that it's quite difficult to come up with a meaningful summary. It was certainly everything we hoped for. As we said at the beginning, there is no way to really know Alaska until you see it firsthand. However, having now witnessed its vastness, it's readily apparent that we have barely scratched the surface of the 49th state. There is so much more to explore that we can't bring ourselves to say goodbye. So, we simply part, looking forward to our return one day. Thank you, Alaska and Alaskans, both full-time residents and seasonal workers, for being gracious hosts. Until next time, see you down the road.